All right, it is 12 o'clock, so we will be getting underway. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to all of you. And thank you so much for joining our conversation today. My name is Lisa Welch, and I serve here at the Civil Rights Commission as the Director of the Native American Indian Affairs Commission. So I'm going to be your MC today. As you may know, April is Fair Housing Month, so today's webinar is focusing on fair housing laws, the investigation process for complaints of housing discrimination, and also some of the resources that are available to all of us as renters and homeowners. As you watch this webinar and you have questions, I would ask that you enter them into the Q&A panel, and you can do that by clicking the icon at the top of your screen with a speech bubble that has a question mark in it, and we'll be able to get to those at the end of today's presentation. With that housekeeping out of the way, at this time, I would like to introduce our speakers today, starting with Melissa Deering, who is joining us right here from the Civil Rights Commission. She serves as Director of Investigations at ICRC. Also, Chris Nevels, Director of Asset Preservation at the Indiana Housing and Community Development Agency, or IHCDA. We have Lon Meltson, who is the Regional Director from Housing and Urban Development. And finally, Brian Phelps, who is a communications specialist and brand ambassador also at IHCDA. So thank you to all of our speakers and welcome. And with that, I think we will go ahead and get started. Melissa, you are our first presenter, so thank you so much and take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this Fair Housing webinar today. As Lisa mentioned, my name is Melissa Deering, and I'm actually the Program Director for the Pave Unit at the Indiana Civil Rights Commission. So today I will be providing some insight on the laws that we enforce regarding fair housing and also some insight on the investigative process. Okay, okay, I was waiting on the presentation. There we go. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Just want to make sure because it's kind of echoing around me, but okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, all right. So again, like I said, I'm going to be providing some information on the laws that we enforce here at the Commission and also the fair housing investigative process. Next slide, please. Before I get started, I do want to make a few disclaimers that the Commission does not make the laws, we just enforce them. This is not intended to be legal advice. For any legal advice you seek, please contact an attorney. And also this presentation provides general information and guidelines and should not be considered official Indiana Civil Rights Commission's policies. The Indiana Civil Rights Commission enforces the Indiana Code 22-9 as well as the Indiana Code 22-9.5. Both these laws give us the authority to investigate fair housing complaints. These laws extend to individuals, private or public entities, housing providers, and business establishments within the state of Indiana. The Civil Rights Commission's mission is to provide neutral investigations of complaints and with the goal of eliminating discrimination against protected classes in the particular enforcement areas that that are covered or designated by the Indiana law. And we also provide education and outreach sources to the public who may need that information. The ICRC enforces equal opportunity in 5 specific areas. Those areas include housing or real estate, employment, public accommodation, education, and credit. This is kind of why we call the unit that enforces or investigates the housing complaints the Pave unit, because we do deal with all those specific areas except employment. Discrimination in housing is prohibited with respect to certain characteristics or protected classes, as we normally call them. So those protected classes under the Fair Housing Act are race, which can include the racial identities, racial stereotypes, your culture or background as it relates to race. Under those protected classes, religion is also a covered basis. Color, so the color of your skin is also a protected class under the Fair Housing Act. Then we also have sex as a protected category. This includes males or females, and also includes sexual harassment against either of those individuals. We also have disability, so an individual who has a physical or mental impairment that limits a major life activity, such as walking, working, learning, thinking, things like that can be covered under the disability protected class. We also have national origin, which is, the country where you were actually born or where your ancestor may have been born can tie into that national origin protected basis. Familial status is another basis that is covered under the Fair Housing Act. And this is having children under the age of 18 residing in the property, but it could also include being in the process of adoption, fostering children within the home, and also includes pregnancy. Next slide, please. Okay, there are approximately 3 stages within the investigative process. First, we have the intake stage, which the intake unit serves as the first responder, basically. So an individual contacts our office to file a complaint or to determine whether we have jurisdiction to investigate that complaint. So the intake's responsibility is to interview the individual to determine if the basis that they are alleging is covered under the Fair Housing Act, as well as the issue that they are complaining about is something that would fall under the Fair Housing Act. And so once they've conducted that interview to make a determination if the complaint is covered, then a complaint is drafted and mailed to the individual for them to sign and date the complaint and mail back to our office. Once that complaint is received in our office, then the complaint, the intake team will process that complaint and assign it a number which reflects the type of complaint, which would be housing, and then the basis that they are alleging the complaint is filed under, just for identification purposes within our agency. If the complaint is not jurisdictional, then the complainant is usually giving information as to where they could, other organizations that they can contact to get assistance on the matter that they are complaining about. Once the complaint comes back to the intake unit signed and dated, the intake unit creates a file for the investigator to process that complaint and investigate the complaint. They also mail out the notices of the complaint to the parties, which is the complainant who is actually complaining, and then also to the respondent who complainant has committed a discriminatory act. So each party is notified at the intake stage of the complaint and their responsibility to respond to the complaint itself. Once the intake specialist enters all the information into the databases and mails out the letters to the parties, the case is transferred to the investigative unit. The investigative unit, as I spoke before, is the repaste unit, and that's only because we investigate all type of different cases: real estate, public accommodation, credit, and education. So it's just a short acronym for all the cases that we handle. I will actually go into more detail of how that investigation is handled a little later on in the presentation, but I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of the process and the stages that the investigation or the complaint goes through. We also have the litigation stage, and where once the complaint is, or once we find evidence of discrimination, it goes through our litigation process. So it's basically assigned to one of our two attorneys, and it could either be heard in front of our ALJ, or it could be one of the parties can elect to go to state court. So there's two forums that they could decide they want to go. Then we also have the Alternative Dispute Resolution Department, which deals with mediations and settlements. So during the investigation, mediation is also a part of the investigation. We're always in constant reminding the parties that this is available to them if they decide they want to mediate. Also at the litigation stage, although we may find cause, they still have that opportunity to mediate or settle the case during that time. The investigation process is guided through 910 IAC 2-6-4. This is where the investigation process and basically how it works. Once the case is assigned to the investigator, then they are responsible for obtaining information, basically concerning the events within the complaint, making sure they identify the proper issues of the complaint and make sure the proper laws have been identified within that complaint. They are also responsible for gathering and documenting any information they receive into the appropriate HUD databases as well as our internal databases. And that documentation can include witness statements, policies or procedures that respondent have regarding certain fair housing issues, interviews with the parties, anything that is related to the complaint itself or that is raised in the complaint is documented in those appropriate databases. Once the information has been received from the investigator, they have to basically analyze the information and make a determination as to whether the evidence supports cause or no cause, and submit a finding or notice of finding to identify why they came to that conclusion. As previously mentioned, the notice of finding is actually the last stage of the investigative process. And so basically, as I mentioned before, the investigator is identifying which laws are at issue in the complaint. They're identifying the specific legal allegation that the complainant is complaining about. They are also presenting the facts as to the evidence that they found and why the conclusion was what it was based on the evidence they gathered. And then the parties are also notified of their legal rights and obligations, which could be, if it's a no cause, they can file an appeal, or if it's a cause, then like I said, I talked about the litigation process and how that works as far as them electing to go to state court or having the case heard in front of the administrative law judge. So if a case goes to, or if we find cause during our investigations, there's, like I mentioned before, there's a couple different things that can happen. There's the post-cause conciliation, which is the ADR department. And so it could go to that department for settlement. It can also be heard in front of the ALJ if they decide they want to have an actual hearing. Or it can actually, they can elect to go to state court, which is going to be heard in state court, and a decision will be made by the state court. Okay. Some common issues that we run into in the investigators' realm or when they're investigating kind of come from both sides. Sometimes it can come from complainant not willing to provide a rebuttal interview. Basically, we're giving them a chance to, give us their side of the story once the respondent has responded and provided their answer to the complaint. We're giving them that chance. but sometimes they don't give us that rebuttal interview, and we're kind of stuck like, how do we determine what is, accurate and what's not? Sometimes the complainants don't stay in contact with the agency, so it's hard to communicate with them in regards to the complaint. They don't provide updated contact information, email, mail, or phone number, and so we run into that sometimes. Also, initially when the complaint is drafted, they may not have a clear nexus between the protected class and the act or the violation. And so as the investigators, we have to try to obtain that information during the investigation. And sometimes it's hard to kind of make that distinction. Sometimes we also have issues with respondents not wanting to provide comparator evidence. And the comparator evidence is very important in the investigative realm because we're looking to see, was that individual treated differently than someone of a different protected class? So these issues can all cause a delay in an investigation. So we just kind of put it out there, just provide the information. The quicker you provide the information, the quicker we can get the investigation complete. Okay, a few statistics. In 2020, the Civil Rights Commission received approximately 116 housing-related complaints. We know COVID kind of spilled over into 2020, so our case processing was a little lower than normal. Once the moratorium ended, I think our caseloads picked up pretty substantially. So in 2021, we received approximately 154 housing-related complaints. Investigators' inventories normally include, similar fair housing issues, the non-renewals, the evictions, the refusal to sell or deal, accommodation issues. But I did want to talk about a few cases that, kind of were recently investigated that were kind of different than what we normally see. There was an employee who complained about an employer's policy, and she believed this policy was discriminatory towards certain protected categories. She was actually terminated shortly after that, and she was able to file, or had standing to file, a complaint because she did suffer an action based on her complaining of this fair housing discriminatory policy, or what she believed to be. So she filed a complaint with our agency. We've had complaints where the respondent didn't believe a routine maintenance request was an accommodation request. Although it was, a maintenance request, it would still should have been considered an accommodation request. Their belief was that it's a routine maintenance request, so it's going to be handled as is when we get to it, not understanding that there are different ways to handle accommodation requests. We also had a complaint that was filed against the Homeowners Association. And the individual wanted to, of course, we know homeowners associations have covenants and things you can and can't do with your property. And so they believe that the accommodation request would violate the covenants. And basically the individual wanted to build portable therapy in the backyard. And the Homeowners Association said, no, this is a violation of the covenants. And so not really understanding that it was an accommodation to that covenant itself. So just wanted to give you some ideas of the type of cases that we investigate. They change every day, but we do have similar cases quite often. Okay, filing a complaint. An individual can file a complaint by calling our office, by coming into our office, and also online. A fair housing complaint must be filed within 1 year and or 180 days, depending on the issue itself, because it could be just a real estate transaction, which may not fall under the Fair Housing Act, but falls under the Civil Rights Act. Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate it. And just for clarity, in case I wasn't quite clear before with the questions, we're going to get to all of the questions and all the presentations at the end of the webinar, just to make sure that we can get through everyone's presentation. So I just wanted to be clear about that. So if you don't see your question being asked now, that's why. So hang in there. Thank you, Melissa, so much for, I think, demystifying what can be kind of a complex process and maybe making it less intimidating, as well as letting people know what they can do to avoid those pitfalls too, should they need to engage with our agency. So very, very much appreciated. Thank you. Up next, we have Chris Nevels from IHCDA. Thank you, Chris. When you're ready.
Thanks. Good afternoon, I guess. My name is Chris Nevels. I'm the Director of Asset Preservation at IHCDA, the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. And today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Indiana Foreclosure Prevention Network and the Indiana Homeowner Assistance Fund. So just to give you a very quick update, the Homeowner Assistance Fund is very new. We're basically at around 2 months at this point. We had kind of a soft launch about 2 months ago. So this is a very high level discussion of it. We've really only done a couple of presentations at this point. So you're seeing the very early drafts of kind of the information that we provide, but we will give you I can give you just a general update on how the program works and what kind of assistance it can offer. But before I get to that, I did want to talk about IFPN, or the Indiana Foreclosure Prevention Network, first. If you can go to, yeah. So the IFPN is a network of housing counseling agencies across the state of Indiana that offer counseling services to homeowners who are in need of assistance to prevent foreclosure, or just to help them with their homeownership situation. So all the counselors that work for IFPN networks are HUD certified housing counselors. And the reason I bring this up before talking about IHAF is that one feature of IHAF is that homeowners who qualify can request assistance through the application process. So that is one thing that we really wanted to emphasize in our program, is that there is free housing counseling assistance available to homeowners who are interested in receiving that. And it takes place parallel to the application process. And it's something that was really emphasized by Treasury, and something we're happy that we can offer to Hoosiers. Yeah, so now we'll talk about the Homeowner Assistance Fund. You can go to the next slide. So the Homeowner Assistance Fund was created by the American Rescue Plan Act, and it's administered by the United States Treasury. Funds went out to all the states, DC, tribes, and US territories. And there's a large range of things that the funds can be used for, including mortgage payments, homeowners insurance, property taxes, homeowner association fees, and other purposes, including things like utility payments and other aspects of assistance. So the state of Indiana was allocated approximately $167 million as for our HAF program. Next slide. So there are some general eligibility requirements that apply to the program. To be eligible, homeowners have to have experienced a qualified financial hardship on or after January 21st, 2020 that was associated with the coronavirus pandemic. And generally speaking, that falls into two broad categories, which would be experiencing a loss of income or experiencing increased expenses as a result of COVID-19. So those are pretty broad definitions. So a lot of different things can qualify. For example, having a child that had to start doing learning from home, had to do at-home schooling, and maybe the homeowner, as a result of that, in order to supervise their child while they were at home doing at-home schooling, had to take less hours at their job, and so as a result, they had a loss of income due to that. That's a COVID-19 hardship. If you have a family member who contracted COVID-19 and as a result of that maybe developed some sort of long-term symptoms, and that resulted in increased costs for medical care to take care of those lingering symptoms. That would be considered increased expenses due to COVID-19. So again, it's a broad category, but generally speaking, they fall into those two categories. Another requirement is that the applicant has to currently own and occupy the property that they're seeking assistance for as their primary residence, and it has to be a residence that's located in Indiana. They can only own one mortgaged home, and then they also do have to meet income eligibility requirements. So those income eligibility requirements, you can see that here on the presentation, are equal to or less than 150% of the area median income or 100% of the national median income of the United States, whichever is greater. The properties that are eligible for assistance are single family properties, condo units, 1 to 4 unit properties where the homeowner is living in one of the units as a primary residence, or manufactured homes that are permanently affixed to real property. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, IHAF can be used for a number of different purposes, but the Indiana, so I guess let me rephrase that, HAF, the Homeowner Assistance Fund, can be used for a number of different purposes. IHAF, the Indiana Homeowner Assistance Fund, is specifically used for mortgage reinstatement, monthly mortgage payment assistance, assistance with property taxes, homeowners insurance, HOA fees, and then additionally any sort of de minimis lender assessed fees that may be part of a reinstatement. The maximum per household assistance is $35,000, and assistance is limited to 1 time per household. So the assistance is provided as a forgivable non-interest bearing loan secured by a lien on the property. And the loan does have a term of 5 years, and it's forgiven at a rate of 20% every 12 months. So after 5 years, the loan is completely forgiven. If you sell your property before those 5 years, all the net sale proceeds up to the outstanding balance at the time of sale are due back to IHCDA. Again, so to cover a few specifics on the individual programs that we offer, there is reinstatement only assistance, and that is essentially for homeowners who have an affordable monthly mortgage payment, but they have a delinquency that was caused by a COVID-19 related hardship, such as a job loss, wage reduction, death in the family, illness. We are able to provide assistance to bring that mortgage current. All of the assistance that we provide is provided directly to either the lender, the county, the HOA. None of the funds go directly to the homeowner. There is an additional eligibility requirement when it comes to reinstatement only assistance. They have to have a debt to income ratio equal to or less than 38% to be eligible. Next slide. So we can also provide assistance with monthly mortgage payments. Qualifying homeowners can receive up to 6 months of assistance, and they don't need to have a current mortgage to be eligible for this. Again, the maximum allowable household assistance is $35,000. Payments are made directly to the lender. And one other eligibility requirement for this specific program is that the monthly first mortgage payment has to exceed 25% of the borrower's gross monthly household income, excluding unemployment insurance benefits. And just to be clear, you can receive both reinstatement and monthly assistance. So it is possible to receive assistance to bring your delinquency current and also then receive up to 6 months of assistance, as long as combined those two amounts don't exceed the $35,000. Next slide. So the application is all done online. Homeowners can visit 877gethope.org to apply. You can see a screenshot of our website there. They would just need to click on that Apply Now button, and that will take you to this page, the application portal. There is a few things on this website. There's a pre-screening questionnaire that homeowners can use to answer 10 or so quick questions, just to do a quick check to see if they would likely be eligible or not. There's also an FAQ and a resources page that has some links to other COVID-19 resources and IHCDA programs. And then obviously there is the Apply Now button that they can click on to start the application, which takes you to this page where they can register or log in if they've already registered to start the application process. And you can go to the next page. And this is just a screenshot of kind of what the application itself looks like. This is the first page where you enter just your primary applicant information. But you can see on the left-hand side there's a number of different tabs where you'll enter things like your COVID impact, household composition, income, property information, and so on and so forth. So there's some contact information, which I think will be provided later on, but I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. Like I said, this was just a very high-level overview of the program, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's nice to see just a great overview of the program, but also we really got some insight into how customizable these options and resources can be for people depending on their specific situation, whether you're talking about delinquency or if you're needing immediate assistance on a monthly basis. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Next up, we have Mr. Lon Meltison. Lon?
Good afternoon, everyone. As Lisa indicated, my name is Lon Meltison, and I'm the Regional Director at the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity here at HUD in Region 5. And I'd like to begin by thanking the Indiana Civil Rights Commission for giving me an opportunity to be present for this panel here today during Fair Housing Month. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do today is to give you a little bit of a background on my office, the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. And then I want to talk about some of the action items that we're currently working on in the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. So let's begin with a little bit about fair housing. So as Lisa had indicated at the beginning of this webinar, April is Fair Housing Month, and this is the 54th anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act. And the purpose of the act was to prevent housing discrimination and to eliminate patterns of racial and ethnic segregation that have long existed in our neighborhoods and our communities across the United States. And this year's theme is Fair Housing More Than Words. And what we mean by that, is that rooting out discrimination demands more than just words. And the Biden-Harris administration is committed to taking action to realize the full promise of the Fair Housing Act. And so today what I would like to do is to talk a little bit about some of the actions that HUD is taking to realize the full promises of the Fair Housing Act. So one area where the administration and HUD has taken steps to protect the housing rights of all persons is taking steps to put the teeth back into the obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. And as you may be aware, on August 7th of 2020, the previous administration enacted a rule entitled Preserving Community and Neighborhood Choice, which repealed the Obama-Biden administration's Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing rule, and which otherwise effectively ended enforcement of the requirement to affirmatively further fair housing. And so in a memorandum issued by President Biden on January 26, 2021, President Biden specifically directed HUD to examine the effects of that rule. And so consistent with HUD's statutory obligations and President Biden's mandate, last year, HUD published an interim final rule that requires every locality and public housing agency that accepts federal housing dollars to certify that they will affirmatively further fair housing. The interim final rule rescinded the 2020 Preserving Communities and Neighborhood Choice rule. It restored some of the definitions from the original rule, and it required HUD program participants to certify that they are taking meaningful actions to address significant disparities in housing needs, to replace segregated living patterns with integrated ones, and to transform racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity. And so at the end of last year, HUD is engaged in a series of meetings with its stakeholders, program partners, community leaders, and others to obtain feedback regarding AFFH. And now HUD is in the process of developing a permanent rule that provides a more comprehensive approach for implementing the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirement. And we would look forward to sharing more on this in the coming months. Next slide, please. So another area where HUD is working to protect the housing rights of all persons is protecting the LGBTQ+ community from discrimination. I hope everyone here today would agree with me when I say that every person should be treated with respect and dignity and should be able to live without fear, no matter who they are or whom they love. And so President Biden on his first day in office made clear that this administration will prevent and combat discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation. On February 11th of 2021, HUD issued a memorandum stating that the United States Supreme Court decision in Bostock versus Clayton County extends to the Fair Housing Act's prohibition on discrimination because of sex. And therefore, sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination is considered to be sex discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. And so this year, we have seen more people than ever file complaints to seek protection under the Fair Housing Act for discrimination that they have faced because of gender identity or sexual orientation. And I'm proud to say that on March 24th of this year, HUD charged a property manager and owner of a Milwaukee rooming house with discriminating against a former male tenant because of that tenant's sexual orientation and disability. This was a complaint that was filed in my office here in Region 5 that our staff investigated, and the charge alleges that the property manager harassed the tenant because of his sexual orientation and gender identity. His sexual orientation and disabilities. In particular, the property manager made unwelcome, sexually aggressive verbal comments, demands for sexual favors, sent unwanted, threatening, and degrading text messages, and used slurs and other demeaning language about the tenant's sexual orientation. Further, the charge alleged that the owner and property manager retaliated against the tenant by threatening to terminate his tenancy and by punching him, which ultimately forced him to vacate his unit. Next slide, please. So another area where HUD is taking action is in the area of discriminatory appraisals. You might have observed in the media that there have been many recently reported cases of African American homeowners who have received appraisals with low valuations. And then after their property was reappraised either through another lender or another appraiser, the appraisal came back at a much higher valuation. Sometimes after the homeowner had removed personal property or pictures which could reveal their race. And so I would like to take a few minutes to talk about one of those cases that we saw here in Region 5 that we were able to successfully settle against JP Morgan Chase Bank. So on February 19, 2021, my office was able to settle a discriminatory appraisal case that was brought against JP Morgan Chase Bank. And in that case, it involved a female African-American property owner who lived in an African-American neighborhood in the city of Chicago. And she sought to refinance her home with Chase Bank. And as a part of that refinancing attempt, Chase had ordered an appraisal for her property. But when that appraisal came back, the valuation in the appraisal was much lower than complainant expected it to be. And in fact, it was lower than what complainant purchased her property for 7 years earlier. And as a result, complainant wasn't able to get her refinancing on the terms she was looking for with Chase. So she went to a different lender who then ordered another appraisal on the property, or a different appraisal. And this time the complainant had removed her pictures of herself and her family and other items that could have indicated her race. And this time the appraisal came back significantly higher than the previous appraisal, and she was able to secure her refinancing. And so then she filed her complaint with our office. And so my office was able to successfully settle the complaint. Chase Bank agreed to pay monetary relief to the complainant in the amount of $50,000. Additionally, they agreed to a number of public interest reliefs. So first, they agreed to provide annual training to its home lending advisors and client care specialists, and to provide periodic alerts to its staff throughout the year to make sure that their staff was fully informed on their policies and their procedures. And they also made revisions to their appraisal transmittal letter and adverse action notice, including language for their customers on how to make a complaint if they feel that there were issues with the valuation, or if they feel that the appraisal was biased in any manner. In addition to investigating complaints involving discriminatory appraisals, in July of last year, the Secretary of HUD and the Director of Domestic Policy Council launched the Task Force on Property Appraisals and Valuation Equity, otherwise known as Pave. And Pave is a first of its kind interagency task force to combat bias in the housing market. And the Pave task force is taking bold, concerted actions to close America's racial wealth gap by rooting out systemic discrimination from our housing market. And HUD is committed to doing its part in improving the coordination and collaboration between enforcement agencies to better identify discrimination in appraisals. So I'd like to take a minute to talk a little bit about the Pave Action Report. So on March 23rd, 2022, Pave issued its action plan. And in that plan, it contained several findings which I wanted to discuss here today. And the first one was that on average, homes in majority Black neighborhoods are valued at less than half of those neighborhoods with fewer Black residents. Additionally, homes in communities of color are twice as likely to be appraised less than the sale price as homes located in a white community. And these findings are very troubling because if a home is undervalued, it could have an enormous financial impact on the homeowner as well as the neighborhood where the home is located. It deprives the homeowner of equity which could be used for education, for business opportunities, or to be passed down to future generations. So the Pave Action Plan set forth 5 specific areas of action. And those 5 areas are: 1, strengthening the guardrails against unlawful discrimination in all stages of the residential valuation. And so what that involves is clarifying the application of the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act to the appraisal industry. It also involves updating agency and GSE's appraisal-specific policies and guidance to reflect how non-discrimination requirements apply to appraisers. It involves issuing guidances and new policies to improve the request for reconsideration of value process. And it also involves addressing potential bias in automatic valuation models, or AVMs. The second action area is enhance fair housing, fair lending enforcement. And this involves strengthening the coordination between supervisory and enforcement agencies. So in a typical lending situation, there could be multiple federal agencies who exercise supervisory oversight or enforcement authority over that transaction. So you may have, for example, HUD enforcing the Fair Housing Act, or the Department of Justice enforcing the Enforcement Act, the Fair Housing Act, or ECOA. You could have the bank regulatory agencies who oversee that lending institution have authority over that transaction. So this action item involves strengthening the coordination of all these separate federal agencies to help make better enforcement. The third action area is building a well-trained accessible and diverse appraisal workforce. And one of the things that the Pave Task Force discovered was that 97.7% of all appraisers are white, which makes the appraisal industry one of the least diverse industries in the country. Furthermore, women only comprise 30.4% of appraisers. So when you have an industry that is not diverse, it really lends itself to issues of implicit bias, which may come into play. So one of the things the task force looked at was how to better diversify the industry itself. And one of the things that they discovered, for example, is that due to the training requirements that are involved in becoming an appraiser, that could have a significant barrier to diversifying the industry, because one of the requirements involves a prospective appraiser must partner with a supervisory appraiser to get more or less on-the-job supervision. And finding a supervisor appraiser can be very difficult. And one of the things that the task force found was that a lot of the existing appraisers will be active supervisors, for their friends or for their relatives, which makes it harder for people to come into the industry to actually find someone who's willing to mentor them in this aspect. The fourth action area is empowering customers to take action. And that involves educating customers in their rights and options if they experience discrimination in the appraisal process, and making it easier for them to file a complaint. It also including appraisal bias in first-time home buying programs, as well as training housing counselors in appraisal bias. Because it's very important to make sure that people are aware of this potential problem so that they can identify it and to seek redress when they may be the victim of discrimination, because otherwise that could affect not only just that individual, but it can affect an entire neighborhood as well. So to give you an example, let's just say that you have an individual who's looking to sell their home, and they find a buyer who's willing to buy it for, let's say, $250,000. The buyer then gets the property appraised, and it comes back substantially below the sale price. What often will happen in those instances is the seller may decide to drop the sales price in order to complete the sale. So number one, that could be depriving the homeowner of potential equity in the home by dropping the sale price when they had a buyer who was willing to pay for the full price. But it could also affect the valuations of all the other houses in the neighborhood, because if the buyer does drop the sale price and that transaction goes through, now that sale is going to be used as a comparable for their neighbor's property if their neighbor property goes up for sale. So that could affect the valuation of their neighbor's property and lower that value. And then it just kind of repeats itself. So it's really important for home buyers and sellers to be aware of this particular issue so that they can address the issue when it arises. And then the last action item is to develop data to study and monitor bias. One of the things that the task force realized is that while various federal agencies collect data, oftentimes that data may not be effectively shared amongst agencies, and there may be data gaps in the collection of data. And so it's really important to have to collect all the data that's necessary to determine whether bias is coming into the evaluation process. And so one of the final action item is to really develop ways that we can improve the data collection and usage. Next slide, please. So the last area I just want to touch upon is HUD's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated our nation's already severe housing crisis. And as the country builds back from the financial and public health challenges brought on by the pandemic, the Biden-Harris administration has made it a priority to deliver housing relief. And so through the American Rescue Plan, HUD has made available $20 million in funding in this past year to our Fair Housing Initiative program partners that focus directly on the unequal impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has had on communities of color, low-income communities, and other vulnerable populations. And then lastly, as we start to turn the corner of the pandemic, we're now facing an eviction crisis in our country because a lot of the eviction moratoriums that were put in place last year and the year before are coming to an end or have come to an end. So HUD has a number of resources available on our website. So this last slide, I have a number of different links that you could go to obtain more information on relief that's available. So I'll conclude. I know I'm at the end of my time with that anyone who's experiencing discrimination or feels that they've been in discrimination can file a complaint with my office, and you could either call the numbers on the slide or visit our website and you can file a complaint directly online. So with that, I will turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Lon. Thank you so much. The Pave findings and your case examples can be pretty hard to hear, but I think that you've really illustrated why it's so important that these protections are in place, as well as these avenues for redress. Our final presentation today will be Mr. Brian Phelps, also from IHCDA. So, Brian.
Great, thank you. Well, as Lisa said, I'm Brian Phelps, Senior Communications Specialist and Brand Ambassador at IHCDA. I'm going to take you through a few programs and housing resources there, share, so we can go to the next slide. Starting with the Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or IRA. Let's go to the next slide. IRA provides rental and utility assistance for up to 18 months, which is a recent change. Just expanded the program to go up to 18 months total. So that assistance is available for anyone that is experiencing either a negative impact during the pandemic, experiencing or at risk of being any housing instability, and also meeting income requirements that are in place. And that specific assistance can help with past due and future rent payments, your utilities, and also other home energy bills such as fuel, oil, wood, coal, pellets, and the like. And wanted to also make note to the note there that renters can receive assistance even if their landlords refuse to participate in the program. And landlords cannot evict those tenants while they are receiving that assistance. Next slide, please. So what IRA cannot do, IRA cannot help homeowners. So if you do have a mortgage payment as your primary residence, the information that Chris provided could be helpful to you. So the HAP program would be where you would go if you were paying a mortgage and were looking to get some assistance impacted by the pandemic or COVID. As Chris mentioned, that 877 Get Hope website is the landing page where that process can be started. If you are currently experiencing homelessness, the IRA program cannot assist with that. And also disconnect and reconnect fees for utilities, but note there that it can pay for the late fees. Updates and improvements or repairs to the rental unit itself, and utilities that are part of the lease will be paid with the rental obligation. So if they're built into your lease or your monthly rental payment, those utilities will be paid via that way. So next slide, please. So 4 individual programs covering 90 counties, including Allen, but not the city of Fort Wayne. Most of the state is covered through IHCDA. The 3 municipalities that are independent of IHCDA and are running their own programs right now are Hamilton County, Marion County, and actually the city of Fort Wayne. So anything outside of the city of Fort Wayne within Allen County goes through IHCDA. If you are within those city limits of Fort Wayne, you'll go directly to them for that. And those links are provided there. And then note there at the bottom, persons living in any of these counties or in the city of Fort Wayne will need to apply directly to that program unless you have a pending eviction or if you are participating in the eviction diversion program. Next slide, please. I thought this was a very important piece to include here. Regarding the income eligibility or how you qualify for the program, there are some what we call automatic qualifiers. You're deemed income qualified if you are currently receiving a benefit from any of these programs that are listed here. So just keep that in mind there. A benefit determination letter or proof of current eligibility is required to substantiate the current program participation. Has to include the name of the program, the amount, and has to be dated after January of 2020. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, the application process is not directly on IHCDA's website, but it is a website that we own and manage. IndianaHousingNow.org was initially set up as a housing database where you could find units anywhere in the state with a search function. They can give you some specifics if you need it. But anyway, if you're looking for housing, that's where to go. So we place that on that website. The very front landing page has a box at the top of the page that should lead you to the application portal. You do need a reliable email address that can be checked frequently for updates. So you'll create an account and you'll be able to monitor that account and the application process using that website and logging in and checking that. Note that we do have it available in English and Spanish. And 211 is a very good partner of ours, as a lot of other folks as well, but we do have 211 operators that are available from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday that can help with rental assistance applications if you are not able or have any challenges in getting that application started. And mind you that call is free. So website resources there. We do have an IRA web page on our website. I'll talk more about that homeowners and renters section of our website towards the end of the presentation. But fact sheets for utility vendors, landlords, and the like. We have some fact sheets and some one-pagers there that should be very helpful for you on that link. And then also the IHCDA's COVID-19 resources webpage also lists some additional housing programs, and there are weekly updates, progress updates on the program that we place there as well. Again, you can apply at IndianaHousingNow.org. And also something that's new here is the Indiana Housing Dashboard. It is a portal that provides information based on the specific municipality or county that you're seeking information for, that will tell you about the population, the housing, the top employers in that area, and also jobs and things there too. So I do encourage you to go to that website and explore that and take a look at the Indiana Housing Dashboard as well. So next slide, please. Again, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentation there, but we do have a team. Most of them are very diligently working on applications, but our IRA director, Rayana Bender, and our community outreach manager, Mindy Goodpaster, are also great resources and available. You'll notice that 317-800-6000 number there for general customer service questions, and then that IERA at IHCDA.in.gov email address for any general customer service questions you may have. So yeah, let's go to the next slide, please. We're going to move on to low income home energy assistance, or LIHEAP, and our water assistance program as well. So energy assistance, or what we call LIHEAP or EAP, can help pay some of your heating bills during the winter or during the cold months. It is a federally funded program. Those funds come to us through U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. What EAP is, it's a one-time annual benefit that can assist you with the high cost of home energy and help if you're disconnected or about to get disconnected. And again, it does not cover all of your annual heating and electric costs, so you should continue to pay your bills regularly. Also note there that we are out of the period now, but as the program begins, which is on October 1st of every year, from December 1st through March 15th, there is a moratorium for that program. So that guarantees that if you are actively applying or in an active participant in that program, you will not see a disruption in service during that period, regardless of how high your bill gets during that time. That's why we're reiterating the fact that it does not cover all your annual heating costs. Pay what you can, pay as much as you can, but be prepared to cover those arrearages after March 15th, and contact your utility provider and make payment arrangements so that you don't have a disruption in service at all. Next slide, please. So the water assistance program, because of the negative impact of COVID, what we call LIWAP, or our water program, was created to provide income eligible households to help paying their water and wastewater bills. A household does not have to be tied to COVID-19. Therefore, proof of a pandemic-related hardship is not required. These funds came from the 2021 appropriations bill and also the American Rescue Plan Act. You can see just under $23 million there. And we do only expect these funds to be available for a time. So this is a temporary program until the funds run out, but we do anticipate having those funds through September of 2023. Our staff are still currently actively working with water providers throughout the state to get them signed up and participating in the program. So that's it. Next slide, please. So again, water and wastewater arrearages, your fees associated with the water disconnection or reconnection, any deposits, and very similar to what I referenced earlier with the IRA program, as far as renting versus owning, water costs for renters whose utilities are included in the rent. There are special rules that apply there. So you want to make sure you're clear and understand what those rules are with that assistance. Next slide, please. Ways to apply. For the Energy Assistance Program, the online application is available using that link or through the home buyers and renters section of our website by walk-in or mail-in or appointment at your local service provider. You can visit that webpage as well to find who that local service provider would be, depending on which county you live in. And there are more details about the Water Assistance Program at that link below. Again, through the homeowners and renters section of our website. And there's dedicated assistance again through 211. Unfortunately, 211 is unable to upload documents, but they can help get the application process started and make sure you're moving in the right direction to get that assistance. Yeah, for questions and more information for the Energy Assistance Program, there's a direct email for that program. Our program manager, Thomas Hartnett Russell, is also available to answer any specific questions regarding the EAP program. And potential applicants can go to that same website that I referenced on the previous slide for further information and the online application process. We do have a page that's dedicated to the Water Assistance Program. It can be found there as well with a Q&A accordion box that'll answer some questions that you may have about the program as well. I will state that the EAP and water programs are tied to the same application process with a little bit of a tweak for the water program. So if you are familiar, or if you have or will be in there, when you see the application, go through the application process for EAP, there is a box that you will check for water assistance, and that will automatically get that application into what the qualifying process for the water assistance program. Next slide, please. All right. We're going to move on to some self-sufficiency. Our self-sufficiency, our match savings opportunities program, our individual development accounts. The IDA program assists low and moderate income Hoosiers attain their goals through match savings and financial education. It's a 3-to-1 match from IHCDA. So there'll be 2 separate accounts set up, and for every $1 that the participating household puts in there, we will match it with $3. Approximately $500 a year, which means it's a 3-year maximum savings window there for this program. So $1,500 in state resources, matched with $4,500 approximately from IHCDA, give you up to $6,000 total. And these are for households, qualifying households must be at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. And each participant receives financial literacy and asset goal specific training as well as part of this program. It's focused on asset building as a key component towards family and self-sufficiency. And that list below defines all the assets. So you can be acquiring education or job training, building or expanding a business, repairing or purchasing a primary residence in Indiana. And with purchasing a home, as much as needed will be used for the down payment assistance. And then anything that's left over will just be used to reduce the mortgage amount, basically the principal amounts on the mortgage. And if tied to education, job training, or employment, you can also seek to purchase a vehicle. One thing to note is that this is a household-based program. So if head of household does apply for this program, it does not have to be specifically for that person. It can be for anyone that lives in that household as their primary residence. Website links, a lot of details on both these pages. The IDA program and the NAP program have their own links. And I think I put this slide too soon. So it's not there, so I apologize, but the Neighborhood Assistance Program, I wanted to talk about that briefly. For anyone that contributes to not-for-profits around the state, or also any not-for-profits that are seeking to have some information for donors. The state of Indiana receives $2.5 million of state tax credits, which results in $5 million of revenue for Indiana not-for-profits to further their mission. It is not just for housing, but housing is included in some of the eligible activities or some of the things that can be done with those resources. Not-for-profit organizations can apply for NAP credits and get those credits, and then solicit those credits to donors, and those donors will get a 50% benefit of the donation, 50% of the donation that they make. So I believe it's a minimum $100 donation. So for example, if $100 is donated to a not-for-profit, the donor does get a $50 reduction in their state tax liability. So if, for example, you do your state taxes and you owe the state of Indiana $50, but you did contribute $100 to a not-for-profit organization that had these credits, you would not owe the state of Indiana any taxes for that particular calendar year. So again, the website will give you more details there, but wanted to quickly touch on the NAP program. We also have home ownership opportunities through a network of mortgage companies, banks, lenders, and the like. Next slide, please. These are guaranteed 30-year fixed rate mortgages, and these entities will basically sign up to participate in the program and then have access to a pipeline of down payment assistance funding, where not all these programs have DPA. You see the Next Home program is first and repeat home buyers, down payment assistance of 3.5%, which is forgiven at the end of 3 years. And also the First Place program, first time home buyer. And I guess that's a good time to mention that the definition of first time home buyer is not exactly what you think it would be. If you have not owned a home within the last 3 years, you are deemed a first time home buyer through these programs. So continuing on, the down payment assistance for the First Place program is 6%. That is forgiven at the end of 9 years. So again, for both of these programs, there's 0 interest and 0 payments. A percentage of those funds is forgiven every year. You know, basically a third every year for the Next Home program, and a little over 11% will be forgiven of the DPA for the First Place program. Next slide, please. Another piece that we have there that can attach to these programs is a mortgage credit certificate, or what we call an MCC. It is only eligible for a first-time home buyer. It is a federal income tax credit that can assist the borrower in either reducing their federal income tax liability or increasing their qualifying income. Reducing the federal income tax liability would take in that lump sum and building that into your taxes. Increasing the qualifying income would take that and spread that out over 12 months. 12-month spread for the benefit of the home buyer as well. Next slide, please. Our home buyer site for our programs. Again, we have a specific area for home buyers. It will take you through a brief survey that will ask you a few questions, and then we'll do its best to pair you up with which program they think is best fit based on the responses to those questions. And we do encourage local partnerships wherever possible. We do have participating lenders all throughout the state. So that link there will take you to the list. It's an alphabetical list of all the lenders that participate in our program. And then we have our homeownership team, which are available to answer any questions you may have, help guide you, push you in the right direction, basically get what you need, hopefully, to attain an asset. Next slide, please. Our website is very vital to getting information and the details on a lot of these programs. www.in.gov/IHCDA is the general website, but specifically I wanted to touch on the homeowners and renters section of the website. It's a great landing place for most of the programs covered today and has a lot more detail than what was presented to you. So whether you're on the home page, there are 5 boxes across the front. One speaks to homeowners and renters. You can click that, or if you go through the menu tree, the homeowners and renters section will get you to all that information as well. Next slide. All right, I guess that is my time.
All right.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. I could tell you had an eye on the clock because you covered a lot of ground in a little bit of time. So I appreciate that.
I was worried about the number of slides at the time, so.
Yeah, well, we all know about the American Rescue Plan. We all hear about that in the headlines, but I don't think everybody knows what that means as far as all these programs, where the rubber meets the road here in Indiana. So thank you for showing us, how to navigate all those things that are available to us. I am keeping an eye on time. I know we're a little bit over, so I want to try to wrap up real quick and just say all registered attendees, you'll be getting a survey. We really want your feedback about today's webinar. Let us know, what you liked, where we can improve. So when you be on the lookout for that in your inbox, and please get that back to us. We would appreciate it so very much. Very quick, my speakers could just hang on a few more minutes. I want to be mindful of your time, but we did have a few questions. One, someone was asking about the asterisks, Melissa, in your presentation under protected classes, whether or not they meant anything. And I think it was just formatting, but I wanted to make sure. So I wanted to confirm that with you first.
Well, actually, those categories are covered under other cases that we investigate. So I was trying to focus more on the housing and the fair housing law to, I guess I should have probably distinguished that they were there, but they're not covered under the Fair Housing Act.
Great. Okay, so just for emphasis, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's really helpful. We had one more question, or actually asking for clarity that gender identity is not a protected class. Rather, it is sex, meaning male or female. I have a feeling that's probably a question for Melissa and Lon, but anyone can chime in.
Okay, Melissa, if you don't mind, why don't I start, and then if you have anything to add, feel free to add. So, yeah, so under the Bostock interpretation of sex, the Supreme Court interpreted sex to include discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. So gender identity would be considered covered under the Fair Housing Act under the sex protection. So there's not a specific gender identity protection that's identified in the Fair Housing Act, but it's a part of sex discrimination, which is covered.
Okay, thank you. Melissa, I didn't know if you had anything that you needed to add to that.
So yes, so those cases would be investigated under the basis of sex. And basically the investigation is the same as any other investigation. We're looking for comparative evidence and so forth.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Again, we did run a little bit over, so I appreciate all of you staying with us. This was incredibly robust and informative. We really appreciate the conversation today. And you have the contact information. If anyone has any other questions after today's webinar, please reach out to our speakers and make sure and check out all those websites so that you can find out all those resources that are available to you. With that, I think I will thank everyone so much for joining us today. I think this was a really important conversation, one that needs to continue during Fair Housing Month and beyond. So I look forward to all of us doing that. Thank you again to all of our speakers so much, and I wish you all a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.